All right. If everyone wants to make their way back to their seats, we'll go ahead and get started. You can yell, it's okay. Amen. It's good to be here. Again, I want to thank everybody for making this a priority to be here tonight. Tonight is about church safety, maintaining a safe environment across this building for all of our congregants, all of our guests. So I appreciate everyone taking that seriously and attending. A lot of this is probably going to be a rehashing of things that we already know. And before we get started, I just want everybody to know, don't get it twisted into thinking that this is not a safe environment. It absolutely is, right? But what we're going to do is we're going to go over to make sure that we're all updated and aware of the protocols, because even though we have certain volunteers in charge of spearheading the safety of the church, really it's all of us that make this a safe environment by being aware and updated on what's going on and how to go about things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up and I'm going to go through some basic policies, and I'm going to invite Brother Fugate up, and he's going to discuss things that are way over my head, but very important things. And we're just gonna, we'll try to have a time at the end. If there are any questions, we can open it up to you. If we don't have the answer for you tonight, we will consider it and get you that answer as soon as possible. But here we go. So we do have a front door policy at this church, and it's very simple, but basically the front door policy is those front doors and the side doors are always to be locked. We never unlock those doors. We never open them and leave the kickstand down without someone up there, a parking lot monitor up there essentially. So at all times, those doors need to be locked. There's never a time that we unlock them, right? So front door monitors, people who show up here, just keep that in mind if you're here on off-service hours, cleaning, or especially during service hours. We never unlock those doors. We always keep them locked. Any events that happen at the church, there always needs to be a parking lot monitor up there watching the parking lot. Whether that, doesn't matter what department it is, doesn't matter if it's church service or any kind of event going on, there needs to be a parking lot monitor watching the parking lot at the front door at all times. There is a classroom policy. All of the classroom doors at all times are supposed to be locked as well. There's only a couple times where the classroom doors are supposed to be open. Those are transition times. That means if we're transitioning from pre-service to class, or if we're transitioning from class to service. All other times, those classrooms are supposed to be locked, and the doors are supposed to be shut, and the classrooms are supposed to be locked. Okay? There should never be any kids in those classrooms by themselves without an adult, and there should always be 2 adults with a clear background check in those classrooms at all times. So very simple to remember. Classroom doors, always locked, always shut, always supervised by adults with background checks. We don't want any kids hanging out in there by themselves. We don't want the codes to the doors being given out to any. No kid should know a code to a door to unlock it. So we're getting ready to redo all of the codes to make sure that we're good and secure right there. But basically, at all times, there needs to be 2 adults with clear background checks supervising the classroom. No kids in there by themselves. Okay? And so that's all for me. Those are the simple door policies. Right now, I'm going to invite Brother Fugate, and he is going to go through some serious topics and protocols that are necessary. Why don't you clap your hands as he comes?
Okay, well, if I'm supposed to talk about stuff that's way over his head, we're all in trouble. So, no, in all seriousness, he's right. What we're talking about tonight is not to make anybody think that this is not a safe environment. This is actually, on the contrary, it's to communicate to everybody that we have thought through a lot of this stuff. We do have policies in place. We have We have plans in place in the event of different scenarios that are going to happen. And one thing that I'm going to touch on just to kind of follow up on the end of what Brother Rustin was saying with regards to students and Sunday school time and that stuff. If you are a Sunday school teacher, just to reiterate, and this is also so that your parents know as well, if your child is in Sunday school class, needs to go to the restroom, adults are never in the restroom with children at the same time. It is not a place where we go behind closed doors with children. This is a policy. This is not just a church policy. This is an organization policy. So this is something that we've just taken from our organization and said that's sound advice, and we're going to follow that. And that is that if, let's say it's a young boy, if you have a young boy and he needs to go to the restroom, he's going to be walked with a hall monitor to the door of the restroom. And he will go in to the restroom, do his business, come back out, and the hall monitor will stay out in the hall. We don't go into the bathroom with them. We're not going in. If there's a need and something happens and they need assistance in the restroom, we're going to come get a parent. It's just, we're not taking any chances on any of that kind of stuff, and it's not because we don't trust people. Everybody that's back there has had background checks. We've gone through that, but background checks tell us what happened in the past. They don't tell us what's going on right now, so we just can't be too careful. So many of you may already know this, but Rustin and I talked about this and felt like it might be at least mildly necessary to cover why am I the guy that's up here talking about this. Anybody really probably could do this. I have spent almost 25 years now in the security industry helping to design and develop security plans, security infrastructure, security equipment, all of that stuff. I've been involved in the volunteer fire service since about 2007. So a lot of emergency training as far as that goes. I did a very short time in law enforcement as a reserve sheriff's deputy. So I know a little bit about this. I'm not the expert by any means. In fact, there are some people in here that some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight probably know better than I do. But I'm also the guy that kept going to Pastor and going, Pastor, we got to do something about this. Hey, Pastor, what about this? Hey, Pastor, what about that? And he's like, you know what? I think you're the guy that just needs to just take care of that. So here I am. So we're going to start with the easy stuff, storms. If we're ever in church and we have a storm, we generally do a really good job of keeping an eye on the weather and making sure that if there is a storm that is just imminent, we're probably not going to be here. Pastor is really good. Pastor does not like to cancel service. We all know that. But if we just know that it's an imminent threat and it would put everybody in jeopardy, we're probably not going to be here. We're probably going to cancel if we have time to do that. If we get here on a Wednesday night, it has happened before. Many of you were here the night that we all had the tornado. I believe Brother Jason got a video of it going across 169 on his phone coming out of Owasso. That was you that took that video of the tornado or picture of it, wasn't it? He was on 169 stuck in traffic. We're here going, yep, it's right there. There's the storm. So it does happen. In the event that it does, the next time it happens, we're not all going to be standing at the door pointing out the storm. Unfortunately, this is a large metal building, and we all know from what happened in the Joplin storms that large metal buildings are not great places to be in the event of a tornado. The safest place in this building is in between the two doors, right outside of the sanctuary door, and the next set of doors is a fire door. That's a firewall that goes all the way to the roof of the building. That's the strongest and tallest structure in this building. Nursery, kitchen, and that hallway area right there, we're going to cram in there as tight as we can and try to be safe if it's really going to happen, okay? If it's coming right at us, that's our safest bet. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, that's our safest area. So we're going to ask everybody at that point in time, if something like that were to happen, get up, obviously back to grade school days, no running, let's all walk, be civil about it, but we're going to have to get in there quick, walk with purpose, and let's do what we need to do to get packed in there and keep everybody safe as we can. Flood. If we ever have a flood bad enough that this building is threatened, we're all in trouble, but this building is on low ground, so it's worth just discussing that there's a huge drainage ditch that runs through here. There's a lot of water that comes through this property when it rains, but if it's that level of flood that we have to worry about it, I hope we weren't here in the first place. We're not in an area where a flash flood would come through here real fast and wipe this building out. But I just thought, hey, we'll talk about a flood in case anybody's wondering. The last kind of storm that we need to be mindful of would be a snowstorm, ice storm, something of that sort. We have had these come in. We're in the middle of Sunday service. Everything's great. It was a little chilly when we got here on Sunday, but by 1 o'clock in the afternoon when we let out, we look outside and everything's covered in sleet or snow or ice, and that's a dangerous situation. Again, we're going to do everything that we can to prevent that there being a gathering when that kind of weather is coming. We've got almost a meteorologist because he flies, and so probably I would venture to guess you probably know more about weather than anybody in this building, and so I will rely very heavily when he's like, "No, it's coming. We don't want to be there." Okay, cool. Let's call Pastor. But if it does happen, we're not going to shut the building down and force everybody out. You're not going to be forced to go home and drive across the ice and snow and all that if you're not comfortable with it. Other means, but if we get stuck here and there's ice, sleet, snow, anything like that, we're going to crank the heaters up. We're going to stay inside. Anybody that wants to leave, hey, you're on your own. But if you, because there are sect, and I want to, don't worry about your stuff. The most important thing is your life. If the fire alarm is not going off by the time you get to that door, pull the switch, because that's also going to notify fire authorities. This system is monitored, and when you pull that switch, it will immediately call. It calls our dispatch center, who will immediately dispatch fire. So, if there's not a fire alarm going off and there is a fire, I'm not asking anybody here to fight fire. If you feel comfortable and there's a fire extinguisher nearby and you want to empty that thing before you run out of the building, you are doing that on your own accord. So please don't try to stay and fight a fire with a fire extinguisher and then sue the church because you burned your leg or something. And these are serious, like, these things happen. I'm going to stay and fight the fire, and then you get yourself hurt. It's like, well, the church made me do it. No, you didn't. We hung a fire extinguisher there if you wanted to use it, and there are fire extinguishers throughout the building. You are not required under any contract or anything like that to pick up a fire extinguisher and go fight fire. If you're not comfortable with it, you're not safe with it, the best thing to do is get out of the building. Where do we go when we get out of the building? There's a couple of different places you can go. Obviously, in the event of a fire, I would encourage you to stick a finger in the air and check the wind, because if the wind's blowing that way, you don't want to go that way, because that's where all the smoke. You go that way. If you do the same thing and put your finger in the air and the wind's blowing that way, don't go that way. Go that way. You want to go upwind of wherever the building is whenever you leave the building. There would be a tremendous amount of smoke and everything that would come out of this building if it was on fire, and you don't want to be breathing that in, even though sometimes burning buildings is fun. Sometimes. But we don't want this building. Quick little engage the audience game here. Who here has medical training? Any form of medical training? Raise your hand, don't be shy. Who here medical scenario? You could know these. You could know these people. I've ran into this firsthand, so I'm not just emergency medical care and office to treat my foot fungus are two very different things, okay? And it really is. I have seen over an emergency situation. It's just different. The stressors are different. The adrenaline's different. Everything about it is different. If there isn't a medical, the best thing for you to do is pick up your phone and call 911 out of the way, and allow that raise their hand and medical training. And I've done emergency medical scenarios. Let them get to work. You are never asked under any circumstance. Fire service, do not operate outside of the level of your training. You had a question? I have talked to Pastor about getting one, and we don't have one yet, but it is something that we are working on. The question was, do we have an AED? That's an automated external defibrillator. That's if somebody goes into cardiac arrest, we would need that. Those things are fantastic because the new ones today, you open it up and push the button, and it starts talking to you and tells you exactly what to do. So if you haven't been through CPR training and you happen to be the only person here and somebody collapses of a heart attack, you could pull it out and push go and start following the instructions and probably do somebody some help, because that is a scenario when seconds matter. So that is something that we're working on. It's a great question, and I appreciate you bringing that up. But again, in that scenario, even if we did have an AED and somebody did go into cardiac arrest, if you're not comfortable with it, nobody is asking you to do something that you're not comfortable with. You saw the amount of hands that went up that said, we're trained in medical, we're trained in emergency medical. Let those people do it. And what I will say is, do not pull out your phone and start recording. We're not gonna do that. That is the world that we live in, but we're not doing that. That's not a time when we're gonna record somebody's, there's no kids in here, okay? Other than ones that won't understand what I'm saying anyway. But we're not going to pull out our phone and film somebody dying. It's not appropriate. So if you see a young person or a kid that they don't understand, just grab the phone and politely guide them the other way, because in that scenario, kids probably need to be ushered out. It can be traumatic. It's something that once they see it, they'll never forget it kind of scenario if something like that were to happen. So we don't want anything like that to happen. If there's a major laceration, I don't know, if Jason's decides to start doing jumping jacks up there and falls over the edge and cuts his leg on the camera. You just never know. And now we've got a femoral artery that's bleeding out. That's a gruesome scene. To my knowledge, our first aid kit does not have a tourniquet. So please don't cut your femoral artery diving out of the sound booth. But these are all things that we've been talking about, things that we need to get, things that we need to better prepare our first aid kits and get the AED and those kinds of things. So, but again, whether it's cardiac arrest, whether it's an injury of some sort, if you are not comfortable with it, you are not obligated to do anything other than make room for those that are going to come in and pray. Absolutely. That's probably one of the best things you can do. Get out of the way and pray. That even rhymes. That can be our slogan. In an emergency situation, if you're not comfortable, get out of the way and pray. So it's one of the best things you can do. So moving from that, we're going to go into the security side of this. This is the area that, unfortunately, statistically speaking, in the world that we live in today, the likelihood of us having to operate on a security level is much higher than us ever having to deal with any kind of medical problems. And the reason I can say that with all certainty is that how many of you know how many medical issues we've had in the church since the church has been in existence since 2008? I can count one. And it was because a young man jammed his eyeglasses through part of his hand. And we pulled him out, and he was fine. And it wasn't a big medical deal. That's the only time that I've seen anybody up here get hurt. And it was a little kind of weird freak deal. And he's fine today. He might not even remember it. I don't know. Maybe he does. How many of you know how many times we've had security issues at the church? How many of you know every time that we've had security issues at the church? That's the part that I want to talk to you guys about. There have been, if I'm just being completely transparent with you, we have had threats against our church. We have had threats against our pastor and his family directly. And I'm not talking about threats of, I'm going to come kick you in the knee. I'm talking about threats on their lives. And this is where this gets serious. And this is why the security aspect of what we're talking about is something that we do take very seriously. There is a team, we'll just use that term, of security people. We'll just call it that. I'm not going to ask them to stand up. I'm not going to identify them. And we do that on purpose. We'd love to have more people involved, because the reality is on any given Sunday, 3 or 4 people are probably gone or on vacation or sick or anything else like that. And so we need more people that are involved in helping watch over the body. We've had situations where general church services, there have been things that have happened. Many of you may see me getting up and walking out and walking back in and walking out, and you're like, where is that guy going all the time? A lot of times there's a situation of some sort. I'm going out there to help somebody take care of whatever they text me about to figure out. We've had situations where we've had to intervene with people under the influence of drugs and alcohol and remove them from the property. We've had situations where people have tried to come up on outdoor events that we've been having. A lot of you probably never knew any of this was going on. And I'm pointing that out to let you know that you are safe here. We do everything we can to make sure that most of those things you never even realize that they're happening. We don't make a big deal about it. We don't walk around with, rifles slung over our shoulders, and we are not trying to make a militant look. We've had this conversation with Pastor numerous times. It is not what he wants. He just wants things handled quietly, quickly, and we just take care of it that way. So, But when it does come to security, Brother Rustin already kind of talked about this. The doors are always locked. You might have remembered a time when we had the doors open and we just prop them open and it's a beautiful day outside and everybody. We just can't do that anymore. So those doors, if you hadn't noticed it, you have not from the outside of this building opened the door without a key in probably 4 years, 5 years maybe. You cannot walk up to that door and just pull the door up unless it's not locked properly or whatever. But you would notice most likely that you either had to knock on the door or there was somebody there, and we don't want anybody to know the doors are locked. Again, this is kind of that keeping the security under the radar, if you will. You walk up and they just open the door. So good to see you. Come on in. Welcome to the church today. Nobody ever thinks twice about it. If people come up and they're having to knock on the door all the time, but that's why the door is always manned, like what Brother Rustin was talking about. We have homeless people that live in the woods behind us. We have had a couple of situations with the homeless people in the woods behind us. And it's a revolving group of people. It's not always the same. It's not always the same person, unfortunately. They do like our building. We keep the doors locked for a reason. They like our electrical outlets on the outside of the building to charge their phones. They like our water faucets to drink water and take baths on the side of our building. All of these things happen, and we have cameras on the building to show all of the crazy things that the homeless people are doing. And recently, the guy that's back there has been trying to get into the building where we store all of our lawn equipment. He's been pulling on door handles all around the building. So he is actively been trying to get into this building. So we do keep an eye on that kind of stuff. I did kind of touch on it a little bit. We do have cameras around the church. If you haven't noticed already, there are cameras around the building. Around the whole perimeter of the building, and then there's a camera in the main lobby. When you walk in, we see every single person that comes into this building because that's the only door we bring people in through. And we do that also so that anybody that comes in here, if anything were to happen, we definitely have at least the video of them walking in and walking out. So that stuff is intentional. So kind of skip through some of this. Because of the situation that we have with the homeless people outside and just the general neighborhood that we live in, I don't know if any of you remember, probably close to 6 months ago, I came in, kind of pulled Pastor aside real quick. Hey, we've got a situation going on, and he just handed me the microphone. And there was some sort of a gunfight going on across the street in the parking lot over there. We don't live in, first of all, we don't live in the best of times, but we also aren't in the greatest neighborhood over here. There's a lot of crime in this area of Tulsa. As we get closer into fall and the time starts to change and the nights get nightier a lot earlier, for lack of a better way to say it. If you have children, they're your responsibility. We watch out for them. We've got a Willie that runs around here, and let me tell you something. If Willie is on the property, your child is being watched. He chases them around like they're his own. But in all honesty, when it gets dark outside, that's why we put all the real bright lights on both sides of the building. We want to light this place up. We want those kids to not be running around out there in the dark. But realistically, we don't want them running around outside after service. And the later it gets in the year, it gets dark outside. And statistically speaking, bad people like to move around in the dark because they don't like to get caught at what they're doing. So the threat level goes up substantially after dark. We're moving quickly. So please, when service lets out, don't tell your kids to come ask Willie or to come ask me. The answer really is going to be no unless you're taking them out there or they are under the supervision of somebody that you've allowed them to go outside with. Until we get to a place where we can build fences and have like a playground outside that's fenced in and a little bit more secure, it's just not a super safe. And if you think it's safer over here because there's a tree line and everything, the homeless guys live right back there. So where they're playing football every night, if they threw the football a little too far, they'd be tromping through the same woods that he's living in. So we want to be mindful of that. Moving into kind of the next step of security. So we have to talk about it because it's the world that we live in. And this is directly from Pastor. He appreciates every person who likes to exercise their rights as a citizen of the United States of America. If you don't understand what I'm referring to there, then you're not one that I need to worry about. I'm not worried about you anyway, but he does ask, and it is requested by the church today that if you are going to carry a firearm of any sort, that you carry that concealed for a number of reasons. Number one, primarily being we do not want to create an environment that looks like we have a bunch of people running around with guns hanging off their hips, and this is the Wild West, and we're in a war zone. This is a church. It's supposed to be, we want this to be a welcoming environment. We want people to feel loved. We want them to come in here and feel like this is a place that I can fit in. But it's very important to us that we're safe too. So we're not going to tell you not to carry. We're not going to tell you to leave it in the car. We're not going to do any of that. But please conceal. And if you're not able to conceal, I understand. I see guys all the time in this church. Listen, you're not going to get one over on me when you come in and your whole shirt's tucked in except for this piece right here. I know what you're doing, but thank you for concealing it, is all I'm saying. Thank you for at least trying, you know. So many of you have probably seen, because I wear a jacket every time I'm here, and a lot of times the split in the jacket will get hung up, and Chris will come up and be like, "Hey, bro, your jacket's like," I'm like, "Oh, thanks, man. Sorry." We just try to be respectful of that, because you know what? Believe it or not, even though we're in America, doesn't mean everybody likes guns, and not everybody likes to see guns all the time, okay? It can be threatening to some people, and we don't want that. So are we good on that? Everybody's good. The next part of carrying a firearm, and I'm so thankful to my good brother that brought this up tonight right before service, but we have to talk about this. If there was a situation where you felt the need to withdraw your firearm within the church, what are you going to do with it? What level of training do you have with that firearm? I can stand here until every one of you is ready to go to bed and you're ready to maybe point your firearm at me and give you statistics on why it's a horribly bad idea. Listen, I'm the biggest Second Amendment supporter that you will meet, but it is a horribly bad idea for you to just pull your gun out when you're scared and your adrenaline just dumped and you just start squeezing. It's a bad situation. You're probably going to shoot everything except for what you intended to shoot. Highly likely. Happens all the time. Law enforcement officers, highly trained law enforcement officers, shoot the first 4 shots on the ground before they even get their firearm up to what they're shooting at. Happens all the time. So again, I'm asking you, what are you going to do with it if you decide to pull your pistol out and go to work? I'd be thankful if you pulled it out and you were the sharpshooter of the year and it was highly effective. We're really thankful you were here that day. But also know that if you're exercising your Second Amendment right, part of that right is that everything that comes out of the end of that pistol is your responsibility. It's not the church's responsibility. It's not anybody else's responsibility. You fire a round out of that gun, you are personally responsible for where it goes. You're personally responsible for every life it takes. You're personally responsible for the damage that it does, all of that. So none of that changes just because we walked into the church. We don't get to supersede the law. So be mindful of that. I'm not telling you not to, just think through the scenario. Let's Peyton, I highly doubt because of your age that you're carrying a firearm tonight, but let's just pretend like you were. Active shooter all of a sudden, boom, right now. What are you going to do? That's the exact answer I was hoping I would get. Because most people don't think about it. Most people haven't really let their mind wander through. Some people, it's really scary. It's a very scary time. And that I am not saying that in any kind of a demeaning way either. It is a very scary situation to think, what would we do if all of a sudden there was some sort of an intruder in this place who had a firearm and was using it? We don't want to be here. That's not where we want to be at. However, I would encourage every one of you to let your mind wander down that road. What would you do if you're in this building right now where you sit? Because most every one of you, I stand here very frequently and I'm looking at people who I know if I turn and look this way, the Tanderups are sitting right there. So there's nothing wrong with that, because actually that means you can go into your mind and go, okay, what do I do in that scenario? Because I know I'm probably going to be in this proximity. Sometimes you guys are over here on the front row, but it just kind of depends on what's going on. But you're in this area. What are you going to do? Active shooter comes walking in from right there. Are you comfortable with standing up and deciding to engage them across the top of Brother Fraser's head? He might not be real comfortable with that. But then that also begs the question, Brother Fraser, what are you going to do? So we all need to think about this, right? The reality is that, and I'm going to say this the nicest way that I can, what we don't want in a situation where there was an active shooter is we do not want a cowboy roundup in the sanctuary. And I said cowboy roundup. There's a lot of other terminologies that go around, but I tried to pick the nice one. We don't want everybody, guess what? If Peyton decides to turn around and shoot that way, everybody from here over is in your crossfire. Guess what else is in your crossfire? All the kids in the nursery. Because that wall is not going to stop your bullets. That's drywall. Highly likely that it'll go right through it. We got to think about that stuff. Again, you're responsible for everything that your firearm does. And so there are people in this church that are a part of the security team who sit in very specific places for very specific reasons. There are a couple of guys that I 100% rely on to protect that door every service. And again, we're not going to name names or anything else like that, but they are positioned where they are every single service so that they are not cross-firing each other, and if they had to engage somebody at the door, they can handle that without there being a sea of people in front of them. We have people who their job in this church, if something like that happens, is to secret service, if you will, pastor, and they're going to jump on him and protect him and drag him out of that door. These are plans that we have in place. Now, is that something that everybody wants to think about? No, but there's a high likelihood if somebody comes into this church to perform some sort of a active shooter scenario, it'll be pastor that they're coming for. Statistically speaking, it's not only going to be him. There are disgruntled marriages and things of that sort, but it's 90+% of the time the pastor, the person that's preaching the message is probably what's going to anger them and make them feel like they want to come in there and shoot somebody. Something was said that they didn't agree with and they felt offended or whatever, and so they're going to come after him. So we have people that's their job. If it happens, they're going to protect pastor. So what do we do? How many of you have heard, I'm not even going to say it, what's the terminology that's been thrown around in an active shooter scenario? Anybody been through active shooter training? Who said it? Matthew, yes. Run, hide, fight. Are you guys familiar with run, hide, fight? Who has, and this is not to embarrass you, but I think it's worth knowing, who has not heard the terminology run, hide, fight? Okay, so good, perfect. No, this is why we want to talk about it. Nothing to be embarrassed about. The terminology run, hide, fight, those are the three things that are largely, I've seen everybody from Navy SEALs to the Department of Homeland Security teach on run, hide, fight. And I'm going to give you the very small Cliff Notes version of run, hide, fight. I will start by saying I'm not a huge fan of the terminology run, hide, fight, and I'm going to teach it the way that I feel like makes it make a little bit more sense. The concept is run, hide, fight. It does not have to happen in that order. In fact, I would recommend that it doesn't happen in that order. If you hear gunshots, it is proven, especially in a room this big, you hear my voice echoing. If somebody pulled out a gun and there was gunshots from over there, it's going to reverberate off the wall and hit you over here and then go over there, and you're going to think that that gunshot came from over there, and you're going to run that way, and you're running right to where the gunshot came from. It's happened so many times. So if you just immediately jump up and start running, we just created chaos. And that's why I don't like the terminology run, hide, fight, because it makes you think the first thing I got to do is run. The first thing I would recommend that you do is get down and look around. Figure out what's going on. Take a second to breathe. If something like this happens, and I know nobody wants to think about this, but we have to think about it. Something like this happens, you are going to immediately, as soon as the gunshot goes off, you're going to experience an adrenaline dump. You're going to experience feelings in your body that if you've never had that type of an adrenaline dump, you've never felt this before. Your fine motor skills are going to go out the window. You'll be lucky if you can crawl across the floor because your fine motor skills will be in that bad of a state of disrepair, if you will. Your gross motor skills won't really work that well. Your legs are going to feel like logs and your arms are going to, and it's going to be very hard to do anything if you've never experienced that before. The body has to learn how to overcome that, and then once your body learns how to overcome it, that adrenaline dump is actually an extremely effective tool. dump, you're going to run yourself right into trouble. Like right now, get you out of here. If you're close to one of the first, plan some the situation as you're making your way to that door. Get out of the building. Whatever happens in here, you're not going to want to be here for it anyway. You just don't. And if you think you do, I promise you, you don't. I can point you to men who have fought in bloody wars and all kinds of stuff. They might be war-hardened soldiers, and all about, but that's not what they want to experience. They're not all about just death and gore and destruction. So run, hide, fight. First you run. No. First you need to stop and assess the situation and realize what's going on. And fact, when you heard a gunshot go off initially, you might not recognize it as a gunshot. You might not initially recognize gunfire. Most people would go, what was that? So we've had conversations, well, I should pull the fire alarm. Please don't. If you pull the fire alarm, all the kids are going to dump out of those classrooms right into the hallway, and they're going to be trying to get out of the building. We don't want that. It's not what we want. Do not pull the fire alarm if there's an active shooter type scenario. We don't want everybody in the building that doesn't know what's going on to just run out into the hallway to try to get out. They might run themselves right into trouble. If there's a group of people running to a certain place, is it the best thing for you to do to join that group of people and run with them? In an active shooter scenario, that's what the shooter would want. There's a large group of people. It's an easy target. We have to think like this. I know it's uncomfortable, but this is the kind of stuff that we have to think about when we're considering the idea that something like this could possibly happen. When you get into this type of scenario, your only goal is to save yourself at that point. It's not time to be the hero. If you have a baby or somebody else who is otherwise unable to really help themselves, that's a decision you have to make. Obviously, as a parent, you're going to take your kids, you're going to take your babies. I'm not telling you not to, but you need to think about that now. Don't wait until that happens to decide what you're going to do. You need to have already had that thought process run through your mind. You need to have already thought about it. You need to don't like and you're on. I know this is not the time for jokes, but sometimes you got to lighten it up a little bit. Okay? Kind of like Southwest says, if you're flying with children, put your mask on first and then help your children. If you're flying with more than one children, pick which one you like the most. It's a joke. Relax. So assess the situation, get down low, try to decide where you're going to go, and then start moving. Everybody will most likely freeze initially. It's one of the worst things you can do. You're a sitting duck, you're a target. A moving target's way harder to hit than a standard or a stationary target. The next thing is hide. Again, not in any order, but I'm just going through them in this order. If you figured out where to really save yourself, save your restroom when it happens. You hear how do I have places because there's nowhere to go? So restroom is what I'm getting at. Oh, the restroom's safe. No, it's not. You just ran yourself into a place. We have to think about this kind of stuff. If you're if you're in a classroom and you have a door to the outside, some of our classrooms have that. Don't try to decide if you want to go out and see if it's really a shooter. If you hear something and you question whether or not it's gunshots, go. Just go. Get out of the building. Take all those kids with you and just get out of that door. If you run across the parking lot and everybody thought it was an active shooter and it turns out that some kid threw a firecracker, I'm not going to laugh at you for 1 second. I'm going to be like, you know what, you did the right thing because you could have saved all those kids' lives. So just get out of the room. If you happen to be in a room that does not have a door, I don't know why they built this building the way that they did, with some rooms have doors and some don't and all that. If you don't have another way to get out of that room, your only option may be when you have to go to the hide. When you hide in a room, again, another thing that would be great is if we didn't have windows in these doors, because then they can just look in and go, yep, there's people in there. Let me just go ahead and get inside that room, right? If you get to a place where you need to hide, you need to barricade the door. The door in all forms of training, when you're talking about gunfire, whether it's military or police or anything like that, the door is called the fatal funnel. You do not stand in front of doors. Do not stand there at the door and put your shoulder up against it like you're going to fight the guy. Bad guys just love to shoot through doors. They don't shoot through much. They shoot through doors all the time. So don't stand in the door. But you need to barricade that door. The best way to barricade the door is if you have enough furniture, build a wall from that door all the way to the next wall across. And then you have a physical barrier now that will not allow that door to open from the outside. Then come up with a plan from that point. Turn the lights off, get down low, be quiet, put your phone on silent. If somebody's creeping around in a quiet building and all of a sudden, dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-doo, you're like, whoop, I missed one, and they're going to come back looking for you, okay? I don't like hide. It's my least favorite, but you may find yourself in a place where that's your only option. If hide is your only option, the next option that you are going to probably have to face, unless somebody is able to engage the threat and neutralize that threat, your next option is going to be to fight. You're probably going to have to face that if you're hiding, most likely. If you are fighting with somebody who is engaged in an active shooter type scenario, you are fighting for your life. I cannot stress this enough. You are not fighting because you don't like them. You are not fighting because you don't like the color of shirt they wore or their breath stink. We're on a level way beyond that. You are fighting for your life. And every single person, I hate the fact that we have to discuss this right now, but this is the world that we live in. This could happen to any one of us, not even just here, but out walking around on the street. Somebody attacks you, you're in a force-on-force type encounter now, and you're fighting for your life. What do you do when you're fighting for your life? Well, if you have a firearm, it's a good time to maybe get it in the fight. Might be a good time to use it. But statistically speaking, too, if somebody's already got one drawn down on you and you go to pull yours out, you're going to be dead before you get it out. So that might not be the right option. If you have other people with you, devise a plan as quickly as you can. As you're hiding, me and Jason had to barricade ourselves back here in the music room because it all happened and we were back there. Hey, if this guy comes through the deal, I've got this guitar. I'm going to hit him over the head. You take his legs out. Once he gets tackled down, the third guy that's in there, maybe Chris is in there with us, you go for the gun. We're going to come up with a plan of some sort. Understand, again, I can't stress it enough, you're fighting for your life. I carry a pen in my pocket all the time. I write with it. That's not what it's there for, okay? When I fly on airplanes, this is the only thing I take with me to defend myself. It's all I can get on an airplane with. So I take a nice sturdy pen, and I will poke your eyeballs out if I have to. I will stick it right in your, that artery that, jugular. I'm serious. Got a couple of weird looks and a couple of giggles and a couple of laughs, but if I'm fighting for my life, I'm fighting for my life. Everybody should invest in a self-defense pen and learn how to use it. I recommend a good pen. Mr. TSA is like, no, don't. You know what? You can legally get on an airplane with a steel pen. TSA can't stop me. It's the truth. It's the truth. I can't carry a knife. I can't carry a gun. I can't do any of that when I get on an airplane. And this is plastic, but this is some pretty tough plastic. I tried it on one of my technicians one day. He was not happy. It hurt pretty bad. We got a good laugh out of it. But think about these kinds of things. I don't want you to live in fear. I don't want you to walk around thinking that everywhere you go, you've got to constantly be looking over your shoulder and, but let's be smart. So back to the hide scenario. Now you're having to fight. It's a force-on-force situation, and you need to bring the level of force that is necessary to save your life. If they have a gun, they've brought a whole lot of force, and you're going to have to fight for your life. You need to be prepared in that scenario. I'm just going to say it. There's no kids in here. We're just going to talk real. You need to be prepared in that scenario to either lay down and die or take a life, because that's what it's probably going to come down to if you're in that situation. I know it's uncomfortable to talk about. But if we don't think about this stuff and we don't at least let our mind go there just one time, then we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we're going to be cowering in the corner, and we've never come up with a plan of any sort, and we don't have anything, we have no mentality about how to engage in this thing. So think about it. Let your mind go there. Don't hang out there. Don't live there. We're not living in fear. It's not anything else like that. But understand that a good plan can go a long way. There have been active shooter scenarios thwarted by students with a fire extinguisher and a good plan. 2x4 and a fire extinguisher, I believe, is what stopped one of them. I can't remember which one it was, but the guy came through the door and a kid hit him smooth right in the face with one of those big fire extinguishers. I think it may have killed him. I don't know if it did, and I laughed because he probably killed about 14 people before he got there, so it serves him right. He's earned it at that point, okay? Again, you're fighting for your life, okay? Take a breath. Don't just take off running, but then run. Stay low. Don't get involved in the middle of the firefight. Don't, try to get away from that. Hide if you have to. Hide is my least favorite because hide almost always leads to fight. And if you can avoid the fight, you're already at a disadvantage if you're engaged in this fight. If you do have to run and you find yourself running out the church because the guy's up here and you found your shot, sorry, bad word, but you found your chance to get out of the building and you take off running down that hallway. Run fast, but don't run in a straight line. There's a high probability that whoever comes in here and does this, if it ever did happen, is not a highly trained marksman. Those aren't the guys usually that you have to worry about doing this kind of stuff, usually. Some of those guys have some mental things that happen or whatever. There's a high likelihood that this guy couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. I can show you video after video, and I was talking with one of the other guys before service, and he's like, have you seen the video? I can show you a video of two guys standing in an elevator, and both of them emptied their pistols, and neither one of them hit the other one. I don't know how much closer you can get to one another and shoot a total of probably close to 20 rounds, if not more, and not hit anything. The point I'm making is if you're running down that hall and the guy's behind you, just give her one of these. How many know the difference between concealment and cover? I know there's a couple of us in here that do. I was expecting at least one. I got one hand. Or did you just put your hand down? Okay. Okay, so let's talk about this real quickly because this can be important. I know, Brother, I saw your hand go up a little bit there too. Concealment and cover. Both of them will make you not be able to be seen. They will not both protect you from bullets. Okay? Concealment means you're hidden. Concealment is the other side of that wall, but, right there in the kitchen is this big sheet metal roll-up door. You might be concealed. You're not seen behind that thing, but you shoot a BB gun and have a pretty good shot at getting through that. That's concealment. Cover will stop a bullet. Know the difference between concealment and cover. Where is there cover in this building? Somebody please tell me. I got a couple people going, you're exactly right. Not much anywhere. So, utilize concealment. Statistically speaking, again, bad guys don't usually shoot what they can't see unless you're standing behind a door, then they just like to shoot doors. But generally, people don't shoot what they can't see. So take advantage of concealment. If I'm running down that hallway and the bad guy's behind me, I'm making a right turn. And I'll go out that door or that door. But I'm not just going to give him the long hallway shot. I'm going to try to get out of sight as fast as you can. Okay, so understand the difference between concealment and cover. Now, that's the active shooter scenario, okay? The last thing that we have to talk about, I'm going to go really quickly through this, is what does the aftermath of that look like? Now I've got to call on all my people that raised their hand when they said, I've done emergency medical. Not trained, not just I went through a class one time, but I have been involved in emergency medical situations. Those are the people that if this happens, again, only if you're comfortable, but I hope those that have that kind of experience would be willing, but again, no pressure, it's totally your choice. We would go into what is now called a triage medical situation. Has anybody heard, I know some of you have, but anybody never heard the term triage before? Good. So we're done. We can go home. No. Triage means, I'm gonna give you triage in the way that I look at triage, okay? Triage means I might have to step over that person because they're not making it. Nothing I can do that's going to save them. Love you to death. But if I waste my time here, you're both dying. That's triage medical in a nutshell. You got to run through there real quickly and make some determinations. I'm not going to be gruesome and gory, but you make a real quick assessment of what the injuries are. You just have a hole in your arm and you're not really bleeding that bad. You're going to be fine. I don't even need to touch you. I'm going on. You're not even breathing anymore. We're moving on. You're breathing, but you got about 3 of those left and you're done. I'm still moving on. This is what triage medical looks like, okay? It's going to be gruesome, it's going to be nasty, it's going to be terrible, and it's going to be a situation that I hope never happens. But again, we have to let our mind kind of think through some of these things to understand what this scenario could look like, or we all become another statistic. We all become a sitting duck. But the more that you've allowed yourself to think through these things, the more that you've gone and gotten a little bit of emergency medical training, or you've gotten some CPR training in a scenario like that, knowing how to put on a tourniquet and knowing what a tourniquet is and how it works, and knowing how to give CPR could be life-changing and life-saving. Those two things alone, a tourniquet and CPR, could save numerous lives in a situation like that. Okay? Knowing how to apply a chest seal, knowing what to do with those types of wounds. I know we've got some people in here who have applied chest seals before. It's not pretty. It's not fun. Let your mind go there. You need to, because you're never going to forget it if you ever do have to experience that. You'll never unsee it. It's not something that you're going to go, oh, it's cool. Yeah, great. Oh, what were you talking about? I don't even remember that. No, you'll remember it. And we need to understand that this is not going to be a pretty place. But again, why are we doing this? We're doing all this so that all of us are better prepared, because we do care about your safety. We do care about the security of this church. And we want all of you to understand that not only have we thought through this and we've come up with what we feel like are some pretty good plans on what we're going to do and how we're going to move into action, but we want you to think about it too. We want you to be aware. The last thing I want is for something to happen and 17 people in here stand up and try to be the hero and pull a gun out and we all shoot each other. That would be a horrible scenario. It's happened. I've watched law enforcement officers shoot their partners in situations like this. If we think that we're above that, then we probably need to reconsider. And so in that kind of scenario, there's going to be a couple of things that have to happen. We're going to have to jump into a triage-type medical scenario as fast as we can, applying tourniquets and chest seals and doing CPR and all that. We're also going to need some people. By this point in time, 911's probably already been called, I would imagine. It's not going to hurt to go ahead and call them again. Keep calling. We don't want to necessarily flood 911. That's not what I'm saying. But to give them the active, here's exactly what's happening, threat was neutralized, we have 12 people now that need immediate medical attention. They're going to send one ambulance and we got 12 people. No, we need you to send the cavalry, because we've got a situation here, okay? The last thing to kind of think about too, if we're in here triage medical and you happen to be one that has made it outside of the building, understand that there will be law enforcement coming. If you're standing out there with your pistol still and you're wandering around doing this, they might come up and shoot you because they think you're the shooter. They don't know. They're coming into a situation where they have very limited information. My recommendation is as soon as you're done, holster your sidearm, cowboy. It's time to put it away, you know. I don't want anybody to get shot by law enforcement. You just took care of, you might be the guy that saved the day and saved 12 other people from dying at the church today, and then the cops show up and you're still waving your gun around because adrenaline, you're not thinking straight, all of this. If you happen to see something like that, one of the other people that's here, and you see somebody that's, hey, put your gun away. Hey, let's talk calmly. Try to bring the adrenaline level down, and don't just run up on them. But we don't want somebody getting shot by the police. Okay? Is everybody comfortable with this? As comfortable as can be. You understand what I'm saying? Are there any questions? We're going to take a minute. Pastor preaches way longer than this. Okay? So don't be trying to get on to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have. And it kind of depends on the scenario. Usually, yeah, and so usually when we talk about muster points and stuff in any kind of a emergency situation, whether that's whether it's active shooter, whether it's fire, whatever it is, there need to be a couple of different places. So. If it's an active shooter scenario, I would love for you to just get away. We'll worry about trying to muster everybody. In a fire, I would prefer that everybody be at the road upwind or at this back road back here, just kind of up against the tree line. There is a road back there. You can't really see it. And don't go crawling through the tall grass. Although if this entire building was on fire, it's going to get very hot. So I would go upwind and then start moving away. I would recommend, if it's an active shooter type scenario, don't go out into the open field. If a guy comes in here and just goes to work and then decides to walk outside and everybody's standing there in a big group out there. But if you look over this way, there's a tree line, which does what? It obstructs view, right? So it gives you something to at least not be quite as much of a sitting duck. But realistically, we're going to be at the road, right kind of at the drive area. Watch the ditch. Obviously, be careful. We don't want anybody getting hurt. Or at this back area and then moving away from the building towards 145th there. So great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Anybody else? Not everybody at once. Oh, thank you. I'm going to play one more game with Peyton. Back to my active shooter thing, because this is the part that we don't think about. Every person in this church that I've talked about has done one thing when it comes to active shooters. So active shooter just happens. What are you going to do? All right, Evan, I'll pick on you. Active shooter, what are you going to do? It's good. That's great. You did exactly what I hoped you would do to make my point. What if I'm the active shooter? I came in as a guest, and I kept my weapon concealed. I made it all the way in here to worship service, and I sat on the front row. And everybody thinks gunshot must be back here. What happens if the guy's right here among us, because we want people to come in? Now, I will tell you that the guys that are on the door and those that are involved in the security team, our whole entire security team has sat down with law enforcement, by the way, and gone through some training on specific to church buildings. Peyton, come here. If you want to get involved in the security team tomorrow, here's how you do it. So, new guy. This is Peyton. Peyton's the new guy. Everybody meet Peyton. He just came here for the first time today. If you see somebody in the church that's new and you want to find out, is this guy safe? We give them the Holy Ghost handshake. That's what we call it. Okay? So it's right here. Now, where do most people carry their firearm if they're a right-handed person? So I'm going to go, hey, man, how's it going, man? So good to meet you. How's it going, man? Good to have you here. What did I just do? There's a high probability that if he's carrying a gun, I just found it. Doesn't mean I'm going to be like, whoa, hang on, you got to go. We don't do that kind of stuff. But now I know, here's a guy that just walked into this church that I've never seen before, and I know he's armed. I'm going to keep a little bit closer watch on him. Feel free. Now, I don't recommend you just go up and grab the butt of every pistol. It's a good way to start an altercation. So what I'll do a lot of times is I'll give him the handshake, and it's like, man, hey, how's it going? And you kind of just slide off like it's, I'm acting like I didn't really do anything. It's a hug and then one of those. But if you had one there, I would have felt it. But in case anybody was wondering, Peyton is not carrying a pistol tonight. And his dad is happy because he's not old enough to carry a pistol yet. So, but anyway, little things like that. You'll see the guys at the front door do that. You'll see some handshakes and a real quick hug with a kind of a quick slide down the back there. Just making sure. We do check bags as they come in. These are a couple things that I forgot. If somebody comes in and they're new and they're carrying a backpack, hey, how's it going? We're so glad you're here. Do you mind if we just look inside your bag real quick? I'm not going to dig through it. Just give me one of those. Just want to make sure, because we also want them to know that we're protecting our church. We're taking an active role in making sure that we don't, come on in. Doors are open. You want to wear a trench coat and 7 backpacks and walk right in the door? Yeah, come on. Yes, ma'am. So probably nobody has looked in your purse, have they? No, I didn't think so. Right, but so generally it would just be something as simple as, okay, thank you.
You'd have to really dig.
Right. But so if you've ever been to like the BOK Center or something, they'll do one of these and feel the weight of it, and they'll look in the top. Well, possibly. And we're not trying to go to that extent either, but, right. We're not trying to go to the extent of making people feel uncomfortable. This is my private stuff. But if I have somebody at the door that goes, looking in my bag, I'm going to have to ask you to put it in your car. If we're gonna draw the line, we're gonna draw the line. And if I don't know you, my obligation is to this right here. I love the fact that we're open and we want people to come into this church and we want to win the lost and we want to do all that. But as part of the security side of my involvement in this church, I'm not okay with just going, oh, well, I really didn't want me to look in his bag. Okay, let's talk about it. If you're not going to let me look in your bag, I'm going to ask you to put it in your car. If it's people that go to church here and have been going here for months and everything's fine and I trust you and all that, and I know that you're not, in a like a issue with a family thing or something else like that, then I'm not worried about the bag that you're carrying. But you come walking in off the streets, I've never seen you before, and, we're going to do some of those kinds of things, okay? Any other questions? Nobody. We covered it so good. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 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 Oh, yeah. It's a great point, and I appreciate you bringing that up because you're absolutely right. That whole system, I don't know, there's some of us that have been here for a long time before we really had this whole system in place the way that we do, but a large portion of that was also with that exact thing in mind. The more touch points we give a person, the more likely it is that we're going to thwart something like that. Somebody's going to see something that makes them uncomfortable. They're going to, I have people come up to me all the time or text me or whatever throughout service, hey, what about this guy? You recognize that guy? Have you ever seen this person before? Those types of conversations are going on all the time. And if we go through 4 layers of people and nobody was threatened by them, that doesn't necessarily mean nothing's going to happen. But I will also say, statistically speaking, I have only seen one church shooting where the person did not already have their gun out. I shouldn't say, I'm going to rephrase how I said that. Statistically speaking, most active shooter scenarios, the person gets out of the car and has the weapon out. So you will be able to, and that's why we have somebody that we call them the parking lot monitor. Yeah, they're going to, hopefully make sure your purse doesn't get stolen if you left it in the car. But their job is to be the first line of defense and the first person that comes running in here going gun, 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 active shooter, whatever. And they're going to let us know, and then you're going to, that's at that point in time where we need to get to action. And close doors behind you. If you're coming this way, by the way, if you happen to be on the service team and you see something and you don't like it, close doors behind you. It's just barricades that people have to open and go through. So the more stuff that you get, knock tables over. I don't care what you do, make all the noise you want, because if somebody's coming in here with a gun, service just ended. We're dismissed, and nothing else matters at that point in time other than being safe. So, but that's a great point. If you're involved in the service team, shake their hand, make eye contact, and greet these people in a way that makes them realize that we are watching. We are paying attention. We're very well aware of who's coming into our building, and know that, again, all of these systems are in place to provide not only safety for us, but for our children and for our guests. We want our guests to feel safe when they come in here. We don't want anybody to walk into this place and go, they just don't care. That's the last thing we want anybody to ever think. So I appreciate all of your attention. Do we have any more questions? One last chance. There's all kinds of other things that I could have said tonight. One last thing I will say, and I'll close with this. If you see something, say something. You've probably heard that terminology before, but if you see something and you're like, yeah, I just don't know. This guy, they keep telling me his name's Willie, but he seems he's like half off, and I'm scared. Say something. Willie is half off sometimes. So, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. So you have to, again, this is why I've said multiple times of thinking through it. It's a great question because now you've created a scenario in your mind that you need to think through. And so how would we think through that scenario? And what she said is it's before service. The service team comes in, and they're up there at the front. They've been getting things ready. They're getting coffee ready. They've been doing their prayer together and everything. And somebody comes in. They didn't have a gun out or anything else like that, but they get in the building, and now it happens right there in the lobby. So what do we do? How many people do you usually have with you in the service team? 4 people? I would highly recommend that your best bet at that point is to overwhelm that person. It's probably your only defense at that point. Unless everybody just takes off running in different directions. And you can do that too. I'm not telling you that you have to jump on them. But if there's 4 of you and 1 of them, and you start seeing something that looks like a tattletale, if you will, a sign of malicious intent. So they say that the eyes are the window to the soul, the hands are the window to the heart and the intent. Watch their hands. If somebody comes in and it's early like that, pay attention to what their hands are doing. Don't just look them in the eyes and all that. Pay attention to their hands. Think like a criminal, is that what you said? Yes, absolutely. Sure. Why not? Absolutely. So you can, and that's a great point too. What she said is sometimes you got to think like a criminal. This is how you study criminal activities, is you try to put your mind in the place of what would a criminal do. And her point was, I would take a hostage. And if you get taken as a hostage, again, you're fighting for your life at that point, and you got to decide what you're going to do. But also to the same point, if there's 4 people there, if I'm one of those 4, I know what I'm doing, and it's going to be to, as quickly as I can, overwhelm them. But again, we got to pay attention. If you're up there as part of the service team, and it's early and there's not a whole lot of people, and you got somebody coming in that you don't know, we need to be watching them. We need to be paying attention to them. We need to be aware of what their movements are, how they're acting. If somebody's doing this a lot on a jacket, if this is somebody that's not comfortable with whatever's under their jacket. They keep and they're tugging at their waist. Those are things that police officers look for. Yes. Absolutely. So what he said was, we want to make sure, this is another reason based on what she was just telling, what she just brought up, a hostage situation, somebody comes in early. We want to make sure that those classroom doors stay locked at all times because it limits their access to places in the building where they can hide. It limits all kinds of different things like that. So another good point. But again, go on YouTube and just look at, how do I know if somebody is intending to pull a gun and shoot, or what? Type in whatever. Be careful what you type in, but type in what you want to look for. How do I study criminal activity? How do I study somebody's criminal intent? You got to be careful on YouTube, okay? But how do I study criminal intent. And one of the things that they teach you, whether it's in hand-to-hand combat type training or in law enforcement training, one of the things that they teach you a lot is you have to pay attention to the hands. There's a whole lot of things that can happen, but it doesn't usually happen without the hands doing something to give away what their intents are. The hands will tell you where they're going. And if people start turning, so if I'm having a confrontation with Rustin and I turn like this, why would I do that? Why would I blade away from him? I'm trying to shield something. This is shielding a draw, possibly. We need to know these kinds of things, right? If you're involved in the service team. Again, this is where my mind's at all the time, and I already told you guys I can stand here and talk about this all night long. But knowing how to see those little signature moves that people do. We're in an altercation, and we're screaming and yelling at each other, and all of a sudden somebody takes a step back and does this. They're either squaring up because they're about to box, but if they step back and this hand goes here, I'm just going to tell you, okay, I'll just say it like I'm going to say it. I'm going to shoot you. Because at that point in time, you've threatened my life. You stepped away and made a motion like you're getting ready to pull a gun and shoot me, I'm going to beat you to it. Or at least I'm going to try. I don't know if I'm going to, but that's my hope. Maybe I shouldn't have said it that plainly, but that's the seriousness of at how I'm at when it comes to this kind of thing. If we're really in this thing and you take a step back and reach like you're doing something, it's going down. One way or another, you're shooting me or I'm shooting you, right? I mean, that's going to be the outcome of it. So we have to think about that stuff. Again, I don't want to sit here and belabor the point all night long, but I will stand here and talk to anybody all night long that wants to talk about it because it means that much to me. This is important stuff to me. So last chance, any other questions? I have now kept you almost as long as Pastor usually does on a Wednesday night.